chapter 23, Discourse 6, in Ayin Beis, page Lamed Vav, page 36. In midst of the discussion about the nature of the 10 hidden spheres. So what we learned in the previous chapter, 22, was the 10 spheres as they are, concealed or encompassed in the essence, which really means in the divine light before the tzimtzum. So he used the word essence. But then a line later he said, it's not a contradiction. Because generally speaking, when we talk about the energy before the tzimtzum, you generally can talk about that in the context of being within the essence. Now obviously when you break it down further, you could say the essence is even beyond the energy before the tzimtzum, because the energy before the tzimtzum is still a language before tzimtzum, after tzimtzum. Atzmos, the essence itself, it transcends this language of before and after tzimtzum, post and pre-tzimtzum. The essence does not manifest in revelation or in the lack of revelation, and therefore the essence is omnipresent, but in a form that we completely cannot relate to, because it could be there and it'd be completely concealed. It's not concealed. See, when we talk about energy, you could say, I see the energy, I don't see the energy. I feel the God, or I don't feel God. But that's in our terms. The concept of feeling something, of sensing something, of relating to something does not exist from the perspective of Asmas, because those are all created instruments. So we even say created interfaces, including even the concept of itself. Itself is Gilui at the end of the day. Some form of manifestation. Whereas Atzmus has no manifestation at all, can manifest, cannot manifest, is beyond manifestation, beyond not manifestation, beyond definition, but not beyond. But right now he's not talking about Atzmus in that level. There are places where he discusses that, especially, like for example, a few chapters back when we learned that Atzmus is not even a moyer, it's not even a source of light. So that's when he speaks how Atzmus is beyond anything we can relate to. But here, for all practical purposes, when we say Eses Sphere Sagnuzus, we're obviously talking within, not in Atzmus itself, but in the, what we call the divine energy, Hidden Sefirot, which is essentially a Atzmus type of consciousness. Because what else is felt there, like we learned before, Hoyehu Shmei Bolvad. There was nothing but him and his name, or him and his energy. Not earlier, actually, we learned that later. So, meaning that the state of when you say Hoyehu Shmei Levad, and only him and his name, or him and his energy, and his exist, means the consciousness, the pre-tzimtzum consciousness, is all about the source. There's nothing else but the source. But it's the source in some type of conscious way. Not consciousness as we know it, because we're independent entities, but there's a source, an Atzmus Dika type of consciousness. So if Atzmus would manifest, that's Ein Sof Lifnei Tzimtzum. So the way the hidden spheres exist there, they could not in any way radiate. They could not in any way be contained by our existence. They're, number one, they're formless, and they're too pashut, they're too amorphous to be able to manifest in even the highest worlds. And then the main part of the chapter is that if they would shine and they radiate, they would all be radiating without any order, without organization, without any pnimi, no ishtalshlus, no process, no structure. They would just radiate, as he said, like hidden faculties that radiate during the simcha, during the celebration. And that's not the kavanah. The kavanah is that these hidden spheres, that existence have a structure, an organized structure, Chochma. So therefore we need the Eses spheres, the hidden spheres as they are before the tzimtzum, to be concealed, to allow for a distinct state to emerge, a distinct state of Chochma or Bina and so on. On the other hand, When Chochma, it does emerge as a distinct entity, it's still Chochma. It is rooted in the same Chochma and does not change fundamental personality. It doesn't become from Chochma to Bina. The Chochma that was in this ethereal state before the tzimtzum, as he explained earlier, from the perspective, this is how God, the essence, sees existence, let's say, how he envisions existence. But there's still Chochma and Bina. That's what he's envisioning. So there, they can be distinct in any way, but there still is a connection between the energy after the tzimtzum, the air after the tzimtzum, the air before. Whereas the containers, on the other hand, are infinitely distant from the power of the finite, which is their source before the tzimtzum. So Chochma after the tzimtzum, as it comes out in the revealed spheres, is still Chochma. However, now it's in a form that can now manifest in a container, and it's in a diminished state. So now we continue in chapter 23, page 36. Chav Gimel. An example for this, and the example for this, like when you combine, kibbutz really means to gather, and tziduf is combine. Gimel Dal Esis Yachad, 3 or 4 letters together. Nasa mehem teva achas. From them is created, that creates a word. You take 3 or 4 letters, put them together, it creates a word. Asher hi keli la'askolas eze inyan. And this word is a container for the concept, for some concept, for understanding some subject matter. That this seichel, this idea, is understood through these letters. So the letters create a word, and the word conveys an idea. Al derech Moshe, for example, Teva is boruch. The word boruch, say boruch atah, or boruch, which means blessed are you, blessed. What's boruch? Boruch consists of shebetziruf daled eis yisachav, that by combining 4 letters together, the letters beis, reish, vav, chav, 4 distinct independent letters. Musig muskel b'zeh inyan bracha. From combining these 4 letters, we can comprehend and understand the inyan of a bracha, of a blessing. Something new has emerged. Shehu shemavarche ish sheyigadol v'yisra b'teiv v'chayev. It's being even more specific. Shehu shemavarche ish, that someone blesses him, sheyigadol, that he should grow v'yisra b'tuva v'chayev, and should have abundance, good in life. So it's a whole concept. It's not just a word. You're conveying now a message, an idea. Harizaskolas inyan mamish, which means this is an actual appreciation or comprehension of an idea, of an inyan, of something. And inyan is not really the idea. Inyan means just a subject matter. So you took 4 letters independently. If you had beis, reish, vav, chav independently, you had no idea. They don't mean anything. They're just letters, like building blocks. Put them together, they create a word, and that word conveys a whole message, whole concept, a blessing, and especially specific, a blessing that is about, a blessing that has content and weight, carries weight because it's a message of bringing person life and goodness and so on. And he goes even further. V'gabe bracha al yena. And we speak about a bracha al yena, a bracha coming from above, connected to above, a bracha al yena, meaning a blessing from heaven. In the word boruch is hinted the root and source of the concept of a blessing. Like it says in Tikkun Zohar, the boruch Rosh Tevis Reishu Mokar Kol Bracha. The boruch is the acronym of Reish, the head, the Mokar, and source of all blessing. See, look, Reish, Vav, Chav, Beis. Boruch is made up of Beis, Reish, Vav, Chav, in a different order, it is a acronym. The Reish is Reish, the Vav is Umoker, the Chaf is Kol, and the Beis is Bracha. So Baruch, in other words, is not just blessing; it also refers to the head and the source of all blessing, all hidden in this, all contained in this four-letter word. I says Bracha Al because obviously, when you talk about a blessing, one human being to another, has also carries a lot of import. But nevertheless, it's a blessing. It doesn't necessarily reflect the blessing from above. But a real blessing from Bracha Al Yena has Reish Mokah Kol Bracha. V'hainu Sheirush HaBracha Shenimshel Mebchinas HaKesed. What does that mean? What level is it? That it's referring to the root of blessing that is drawn from the level of Kesed. So though he's using an example, but you see this example is within the subject of the Hemshech of Ayin Beis, which is all about Kesed, the ultimate interface. So blessing essentially draws down from the level of Kesed. All this is hinted to all this is included in the word boruch. Pasha Ekev, Daf Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph, and Zohar Pasha, chapter of Ekev, page 271a. The boruch hu b'chochma. The boruch is in the level of chochma, which he just said is keser. Kasher reish mokir kol bracha. The root, the head, and the root of all blessing is keser. But in Zohar it says Baruch is in the level of Chochma, which is also related to the whole Hemshech, because we're talking about Chochma becomes the Chochma Stima, becomes the interface between Keser and Atzilus. I'm just pointing that out. And in general, more specific, well, B'derech Klal means more general, but it could also be more specific. B'derech Klal, overall, Baruch is the level of Yisei Daba. So Chochma has within it 10 spheres. Yisod of Chochma is basically Yisod Abba, that's the expression in Kabbalah. It's the Yisod, the foundational element of Abba, of Chochma. As it says in Me'er. So we have here quote Tikunei Zayar, and Me'er, which is written by a Talmud of the Arizal. It's essentially an encyclopedia of terms according to Kabbalah. It goes in alphabetical order from Aleph to Taf. And every word has a few lines. And there's Yair Nesiv, a commentary there that explains it. But it's a very fundamental text that Chassidus brings because it establishes the level. It doesn't explain much in explanation, but establishes different levels. Like you want to know what is Baruch, what is Melech, what is Shabbos, what is the sun, what is the moon, what is the table, what is a Torah. It goes in alphabetical order and gives you the source, and usually cites in the commentary the Zohars or the Tikkun Zohars where it's taken from. So basically, Baruch, we now have three interpretations. Baruch is Kesed, Chochma is Zohar, and Me'er is Yisod Abba. And now he continues to explain this word Baruch. The Yesh Hefers ben Baruch leBracha. Go even further. Baruch is specifically Beis Reish Vav Chaf. It's not Beis Reish Chaf Hey. So as you see, the word is specific. It's not just a general idea of blessing. There's a difference between Baruch, which means to bless. Baruch is a verb, the action of blessing. Baruch, you are blessed, or may you blessed, or Baruch. Bracha is the noun. The blessings in. The Iyu Baruch b'chinas Yisod Abba. Iyu Baruch is the level of Yisod Abba, which, as I just said, is the Yisod within Chochma. The I Bracha b'chinas Yisod Dima. And Bracha, Baruch also is masculine. The Ihu Baruch, meaning masculine, is the level of Yisod Abba. The Ihi, you see with the Yud, Bracha, with the He at the end, is feminine b'chinas Yisod Imo. So we know Chochma Bina is father and mother, or Abba and Ima. So more Kabbalistically, usually the words are Abba v'Ima, but even Chassidus, sometimes it's interchangeable, depends what we're emphasizing. Sometimes we talk about Chochma and Bina alone, the emphasis is Chochma is concept and Bina is understanding. When we talk about Chochma and Bina as the root of the Midas and the beginning of all of Atzilus, then it's the father and mother. Because the father and the mother together conceive and create the emotions that come afterwards. So it says, so basically, Iyu Baruch, this is probably in Ha'ma'ir, that Iyu Baruch is the level of Yished Abba. I see the difference. I said Baruch and Bracha as a verb and a noun. You see here, it also could be Bracha, he's speaking also masculine and feminine. Yished Abba, and this is Yished Ima. V'yesh hefresh ben Baruch, the Birchas HaShachar, the Birchas HaMitzvos. And he's going even further, how all one word contains so much information. Now, a word, as we shall see, is also an interface. It's an interface because Beis, Reish, Vav, Chav, on their own, do not yet have an interface. You don't know what they mean. They cannot be combined in this word. They can be combined in other words. They can be combined in other ways. But now that you've turned them into boruch, they've become now a conveyor of a message, of an idea. And he's just elaborating on the idea just to show you how 4 letters that have no meaning on their own, suddenly just bring them together. Nothing new happens. They're the same 4 letters, but they're now in order that create a word, and suddenly you have a whole volumes of ideas are sprouting. And now there's a difference in boruch itself, the Birchas HaShachar, the Birchas HaMitzvos. You say, for example, boruch, when you say a mitzvah, boruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu, the mitzvah. So then there's boruch that we say in Birchas HaShachar in the morning. We say certain brachos. The morning's brachos. So there's a difference between this boruch and that, the boruch of the morning blessings, or Birchas HaMitzvos. Or Birchas HaNenin, and blessings on mitzvahs. And the third category is Birchas HaNenin. It's a whole category also, blessings that we make on things that we have hana from, that we have pleasure from. Like if you see a beautiful tree, or other things that is a whole category of Birchas HaNenin, things that we have enjoyed. So Birchas HaMitzvahs is on a mitzvah. Birchas HaShachar are the blessings we make, thanking God for certain blessings, faculties, and functions that we have. And Birchas HaNenin is a whole other category of brachas. 3 different levels of brachas. Shehem Ma'ila Lamata. And these 3, actually, he's actually combining them all. Sorry. The Hashefresh ben Baruch, the Birchas HaShachar, Birchas HaMitzvos, Birchas HaNenin, Shehem Ma'ila Lamata. He's actually bunching them all together. I was distinguishing between, he's actually distinguished, says, these 3 categories are Ma'ila Lamata. They're drawing down God's blessing in whatever particular area we're talking, whether it's the morning blessings, mitzvahs, or hana, or pleasure. Or Birchas HaAmida, and the blessings of Amida by Shemoneh Esrei, when we stand, Malmata Lamaila, that we elevate something from below upward. So I didn't read it correctly. I was thinking it was being Yesh Hefresh ben Birchas, the Birchas HaShachar, Birchas HaMitzvos, Birchas HaNenim, Shehem Malmata. So generally, he's bunching these 3 together. They're Malmata Lamata. And look at the distinction. Then there's an other type of bracha. The brachas that we say in Amida, which, every weekday it's 18 blessings. Shabbos, obviously, we don't say all the 18. And Yom Tov also not. In Kippur, we say 9. Special. Generally, we say 6. And now we brought another Kabbalistic source, Priyetz Chaim, which is from the Arizal, where there he says this distinction between the brachas, Shachar, Mitzvahs, and Nenin, to compare it, which is from above down, to the blessings at Amida, which is from below up. And Ayin, the word Hebrew in Ayin means not just look. Ayin means to immerse yourself. Iyun. Ayin Mashal HaMaz, Moshe Zakato is a commentary on Zohar there, the Zohar Pasha Ekev. Ayin Mashal Kosev L'Likutei Torah Da Kamiflige. And look at L'Likutei Torah from the Alter Rebbe Da Kamiflige. From the Sifta de Rekia, that is Pasha Sazriya. U'Besidr B'Pirush Baruch Sh'Amar. And the Siddur, which is the Siddur of the Alter Rebbe, compiled by the Mittler Rebbe, the explanation of Baruch Sh'Amar, Baruch. So we have here a whole series of discussion on Baruch, what Baruch is. First, it began with a simple meaning that being someone blessing someone for good, a life. Then he included bracha, how it is in the root. Rosh Teva is the acronym Reish Shemaka Kol Bracha. Then the level of that kesed. Then how Zeir says Chochma. You say the Abba according to Meir. Boruch and bracha, you say the Abba, you say Dima. The difference between Birchas Shachar mitzvahs and Birchas Hanen, and Birchas mitzvahs, Birchas Hanen, from below, and from above down, and Birchas Hamidah. And then, without even saying details, look at Ramaz and look at the Torah, and in the Siddur, and you have more explanations in this whole discussion of Baruch. So all this. So here's the conclusion. So we see from this, in the word Baruch has Haskalah Gdela. Gdela literally means great seichel, great idea. But he means expansive. He means volumnius, meaning that it has a lot of information, a lot of ideas. Gdela. Scholar Gdela also means it's not just, in other words, a small idea, it's comprehensive. In other words, it carries, you can write a whole book just on the word Baruch, basically, on these 4 letters. Now, when you begin to learn with a child, begin to teach a child, doesn't understand the combination of letters together. You teach him one letter, Aleph. They should say this individual letter, this specific letter. Teaching him to say an Aleph. Let's say you're teaching him to say Aleph. Ayin Beis levad b'teves boruch. In the mashal he's using, which means, well, actually, Eis Aleph. I don't think he's saying Eis Aleph. He's learning Eis Echad. Lema is playing. You're teaching him one letter, not Aleph. I thought he was saying Aleph. You're teaching him one letter, one individual letter. In the example that we're using, you show him only the letter Beis from the words Baruch. You take the first letter of Baruch, you're just showing him the letter Beis. This is clearly a tzimtzum, a diminishment, a concealment, in contrast to the teacher, because the teacher knows the word and knows many words. And the tzimtzum consists of that the letter Beis should not be combined with the 3 other letters that follow it in Baruch, Reish, Vav, and Chav. Because this is not fitting, appropriate to the understanding of the child. Rather, it has to extend, it has to transmitted as a letter on its own. And in this division, in this separation, that you're conveying only the letter Beis, only that one letter, that first letter of Baruch. This causes it, or I can't say this causes it, this distinction or this separation that you're just conveying the letter Beis, this means consists that the letter has descended greatly, much or greatly, from its initial state, from its level. Because its energy, meaning the energy of Seichel of Baruch, the Beis as part of Baruch, has now left it. Nostalgic manner in the sense as it's like nostalgic. I mean, stalkus, we use the stalkus of neshama. Nostalgic means it's been removed, has expired, has left it. The letter is devoid now of this energy. And what remains is nothing but a little, but a bit of a bit. of the energy that it contained when it was part of the word boruch. Because in the beginning, when it was combined with other letters in the word boruch, the boruch canal. It had the whole haskalah, it had the whole entire content, it had the ideas, haskalah meaning the whole concept of boruch. And even more so, im tevis boruch hoye mechuberes tchilim oy tevis, kumei boruch shamar v'hoye elah. And even more so, this word baruch was connected with more words, like the word baruch shamar v'hoye elah, which is what he brought before from the Siddur, baruch shamar. So then, it means more than just baruch. It means blessed is the one that says there should be a world. So you're then talking a whole new volumes of ideas. All this was in the word baruch before it was separated and distinguished for the student, for the child who only can relate to the letter itself. So you move mehem haskalah mufla. Now he's saying more than before he said haskalah gdela. Because from these words would have been understood haskalah mufla, a wondrous, an awesome concept. For who? What is the concept? What's so awesome about it? That through just speaking alone, through one God's voice or God's utterance. All the worlds were created through one utterance. Through an utterance alone, all the worlds were created without any effort and exertion. But rather in a form of hutziva that he commanded, the nivro, and created. In other words, in a form of automatic, meaning effortless. Hutziva v'nivro, they commanded and created. That's just a matter of just stating it and creating. All this is contained in Baruch Shamar v'hoye elah, an awesome concept. And now he goes deeper and explains it. See, he's explaining it because it just brings out the extent of what Baruch really contains. But b'sharshay, and in its root, what is the root of this Baruch Shamar v'hoye elah? What is the root of that? Blessed is he that speaks and creates through an utterance. B'sharshay b'chinas amida da'ak. It's still connected to the ideas. In its root, this is the speaking, the utterance of Adam Kadman. Shenivra be'kol ha'elam is ba'ashva, through which all the worlds were created equally. He's actually now quoting what he said earlier. To look in the Siddur, like it says in the Siddur, Mitla Rebbe Siddur, the Alter Rebbe's Maimorim, in the explanation of Baruch Shamar. So remember before we spoke about Ak as being an example for Hidden Sefirot. So I guess the subject matters that he's bringing Keser and so on are all within the subject as well. But the main point, however, is that there's a whole depth in this Baruch Shamar Elam. So it's not just that. So besides the fact that a maimer, God's utterance, creates without effort, in its root now, this Baruch Shamar Elam, as explained in Siddur, contains a deeper concept. It refers to its root of the utterance of Ak, that as Ak, Amira of Ak, creates everything with one equalize, everything at once. Okay, that describes what happens. What's the point of blessing God? When we bless God with this type of blessing, we say Baruch She'amar. No, we're not just saying God can create with an utterance, without effort, but from Ak. By our blessing, the purpose of saying Baruch She'amar is that through this blessing, a blessing should draw down. Bracha comes from Hamshacha. There should be a revelation of this Amirah. That, this way, God utters Asarim Amaris Nivra Elah. With 10 utterances, he creates the world. But that's on the divine level. As we spoke earlier, Esesfir Sagnuzis and Ach, the way they're on that level, there wouldn't be an existence. Ach is the way everything includes in God's mind, so to speak, in God's utterance. What we want is a revelation of that down here. So he's hinting to actually the interface within this example for Esses. He's hinting to the purpose of the bracha is to actually draw it down. So it's interesting. It's a mashal, but it's also a mashal that has within it a subplot of hinting to the ideas that he's discussing here. But we have to still go back to the nimshal. This is all to explain how boruch, how when you're speaking to a child, you're teaching Beis, has very little left from the energy that was in the word boruch, and especially the word boruch as it connects to the other word boruch shama b'hayel. Okay, so that's what the blessing is. Like it says in Pirkei Avos, it goes like this: God created the world with 10 utterances, and then continues. It says, and He could have created it with only one. And the Mishnah Pirkei Avos continues, the beginning of chapter 5. Now He created this in order to give schar to tzaddikim and retribution to the wicked. But the bottom line, what's the Maimer Echad? Could have created. What is the meaning of the Mishnah? The meaning of the Mishnah is that he could have created a one Maimer that's Ach. That would be one utterance that, like we said before, Machshava Gduma, the thought, the vision that encompasses all of existence. And he chose to create it in 10, which is the spheres, actually, 10 spheres, which breaks down that there's a structure to existence. So when we say Baruch She'amar B'Haya Elam, we're saying we want to draw down into the structure the energy and the intensity of that one utterance that encompasses all the 9 utterances. Okay, all this is in the word Baruch and Baruch She'amar B'Haya Elam. And when we separate this letter Beis on its own as a distinct letter, it does not contain in it this entire haskalah, this entire concept that we've just discussed. But you can't say completely disappeared. But because this letter was part of a word, and already was in there before we separated it to teach the child, so something remains, some measure, some small measure of the concept remains inside the letter. And then he says in the parentheses, and this is only in a form of a impression alone. Well, and according to the subject matter of this example that we are now discussing, that we're now involved in, in other words, he's saying is that in other contexts, this mashal could be used in different ways. But in our context, it's important to emphasize that this that remains in the letter Beis after you separate it from the other letters of Baruch, it's only a form of diminished. You can't call it siluk, meaning complete concealment, complete removal. That's the word I was looking for, removal. And that leaves only an impression. I'm not sure. When you read it, you can read it two ways. You could read that it's only a diminished and not in a form that is completely removed and only leaves an impression. Yeah. Or you can read it the other way. Because he said in the beginning it does leave an impression. You could say that it's miyut levad, it's only a diminishment, not in a form of complete removal. And then comma. In other words, after levad, make a comma, and then leibchin is still a comma. And there remains only a impression. So you can really read the Shinish Rak L'Shima both ways. I mean, practically you'd read it as being, that's what happens, because he says, it looks like he's adding something here. It could be he's adding that it's more than just a Shima. More than just an impression, because it's not complete concealment. You see, the Rishima that we usually talk about is the Rishima, if not about the energy, it's the containers. The source in the letters before the tzimtzum, in the letters of the container, so to speak, the letters of the 10 hidden spheres, when there's the total tzimtzum, complete concealment. So those letters emerge, and there is shimu. That's siluk. Here, okay, we'll probably understand this as we go further. Here, we're talking about the diminishing of the energy of the 10 hidden spheres, which we were discussing is not complete siluk. It's only a diminishing. So it leaves more than just a Rishima. That's what it seems like he's leading to here, this parentheses. So in other words, there's two types of Rishima. The one that is left from the energy, and the bays from boruch after when you separate it. And there's a Rishima that's the containers that he's going to discuss later. Okay. Because the idea of letters is like containers. Mm-hmm. Okay, let me read then the process. Nevertheless, we can say what I just said. And this too, there are two things. That this too has two levels. Is the level that is only a diminishing alone. And there's also a level which is complete removal, as we shall explain. Okay, I understand. You could argue that the boruch is not talking about the energy, you're talking about the containers, because letters are containers. So the case of boruch, we remove the bays, and the energy is removed completely because these are letters, the containers. The only thing that's left is a residue, an impression. But he's really saying there's really two things here, as I just suggested. There's Ushimu from the energy itself. The base still has energy. The energy is only a diminished state. The container part requires complete removal. He's not explaining it, but he's just saying that there's two things here. So when you say some of the seichel remains in the letter base, if you're talking about the container, it's only an impression. If you're talking about energy, there's a little seichel too. I don't know how he's going to explain it, but it could be. I'll say what I'm going to say. Let's see what he says afterwards. It could be because if you have a word boruch, we're not talking about the word is not yet created. We're talking about a word boruch. You take a child and you show him boruch in the siddur, boruch shama. You show him the base. Let's focus on the base. So when the teacher knows that base is part of an entire word, part of an entire phrase that has a whole concept, as we just discussed. The child only sees the letter base, has no clue of what's included. So from the child's perspective, the letter base is almost no seichel in it, except that it's a letter base. Not seichel connected to boruch. The teacher absolutely sees the seichel there. But when the teacher is speaking to the child, he's only focusing on the base. But you can't say that the entire concept is completely gone. Because one day that student will learn from the base that it was part of a word. And he will learn the ideas. If the base was a complete utter concealment, then there'd be no way back. There'd be no interface back. So it's not just a concealment like the container is now a dead container until energy enters into it. No, base is still alive. It's a live word, letter. Except you don't see the entire seichel within it, but it contains it in some way. It's more than just a container like a body without a soul. It has some of the soul within it. That's essentially what he's saying here in this base. And that's why there's, in other words, two components to it. If you talk purely container, yes. If, for example, if you ask the child, you take the base outside of the word, the base, and he never connects it back to boruch, in a sense it doesn't have a connection. But because it was part of a word, so it has k'tzas, nishamenu k'tzas ba'os. Askol nishamenu k'tzas. And the parentheses distinguishes an impression. Yeah. I would say Shanisha Dakrishima is referring to siluk. They speak in the parentheses deeper. First he's saying it's only an impression, but then he says, according to our discussion here, you have to say it's more than an impression, because it's only a diminishing. The container is only and has an impression. But energy, there's some form of something remains. And even though the energy within the base alone was diminished and concealed, and you cannot see in it all this askal, all the concepts of that we discussed in the word boruch and boruch sham, the phrase, and the word and the phrase that the word is part of. Nevertheless, the base is still the same base mamish. It's not a different letter. It's the base, the same base of boruch, literally the same letter. Shahaya b'chinas boruch, shahaya b'tevis boruch. Who atzmei habeiz hamuvan l'godol shemusik ba'in habracha. So that base that you're teaching to the child is the same base exactly in the word boruch, and it's the same base that's understood to a greater mind. Shemusik ba'in habracha be'ezem adrega shehi. Who within him comprehends the concept of a blessing, whatever level we're talking about, all the levels he discussed earlier, or even more so, the whole subject matter of Baruch Shama that God through utterance creates. So that same letter base that you're teaching a child, that same letter base, not a different one. So the same child looks at the base of Baruch, is only seeing its base. The same person, the teacher or someone else, looking at the same thing, says the same base, he sees base as part of a whole reality. Obviously, all this is going to be an example for spheres, the revealed spheres reveal that was there before, but in a concealed form. Energy we're talking about. Now it goes back. This was a mashal. So 3/4 of this chapter, 2/3 of this chapter are an example. Now he goes back. Similarly, we can understand the tzimtzum, the concealment, what that was in the 10 hidden spheres, the way they are encompassed in the infinite divine light before the tzimtzum. In the beginning, meaning in their original state, and in their initial state, these 10 spheres were all united and all mixed together. If you recall, he spoke about how everything Chesed Gvura is all Sardus V'Sarvus. The Levad Ma'ashahoyelei B'Chinas Mitzias Nekeres Kanal. Besides the fact, or in addition to the fact, besides the fact that they were not a recognizable, distinct entity, and the parentheses he has, because if they were, they could never have been united. If it's not this way, if it was not a form that they were not a distinct entity, they could never have been united together, because their distinction would have separated them. So in addition to that, besides that, within them was radiating an energy, a light that is mufla, that is awesome, and extremely sublime, or extremely lofty, or high, or elevated. And it was not possible, it wasn't potentially possible, it wasn't conceivable, that the worlds, even the highest ones, not possible for these worlds, even the highest ones, to receive and contain the revelation of these 10 hidden spheres the way they are encompassed in Ein Sof Baruch. In other words, the way they are boruch. Actually, Ein Sof Baruch was the word boruch. The way they are included, the base is included in boruch, and boruch shama. That's why he didn't just use the words, also the phrase, because spheres agnuzis are all encompassed in a higher reality of, I said, like Atzmus consciousness before the pre-tzimtzum, that contains volumes and volumes, even more than the word even more than the word baruch and baruch she'amar v'haya. So if that was revealed, think of the child. The child would never learn the word, the aleph base. They would never learn the letter. In the parentheses, yeah, the hey mitzad etzamai losam. The reason they cannot be received, even the highest worlds cannot have this revelation, is for both reasons. Firstly, because of their fundamental superiority, or their fundamental virtue, that they're complete formlessness, as we spoke earlier, the 10 hidden spheres. And also, so in other words, both also because of the revelation, the light and energy and revelation that's within them. So for two reasons, he's breaking it down. The worlds, even the highest, cannot contain this energy. First of all, the energy itself of the 10 spheres is a formless state. That doesn't allow the worlds to contain them. And also because they contain within them energy that's even more than their own. Like he said with boruch. So the worlds could not contain this revelation if it were not for the tzimtzum, the concealment that allows a sphere, on a distinct sphere, Chochma, to emanate, to be transmitted from that space. So take away the tzimtzum, concealment, you have this intensity of formless energies that are all connected like letters are connected to words and to phrases. And they contain, number one, they themselves are formless. Number two, that they're full of that intensity. The tzimtzum is what allows an individual letter to emerge. In this case, an individual chochma, distinct level. And even though, as we said with boruch, the Beis of boruch, that this Chochma that revealed, this distinct entity called Chochma, is exactly the same one that was encompassed before in the infinite divine light, in Kol Spheres Agnuzas, together with all the 10 hidden spheres, nevertheless, when it's transmitted as alone, as a distinct letter, as a distinct entity, the and it's not mixed together and combined with the other levels. That is a descent from its level, from its essentially essential initial level. And here too in the parentheses he says two things. The levad hayridisha de etzema is galus. Besides for the descent that comes from the actual revelation of this individual distinct letter. But through the tzimtzum it descends, that it becomes mitzias dover, a tangible entity who can now pay the conveys. As we mentioned, discussed earlier in the previous chapter, 22. So in addition to that, oh, okay, sorry. Let me read it differently. The parentheses is only covering one side of it. And then there's the outside of the parentheses is saying like this. So now we said the Chochma is exactly the same Chochma as it was in the hidden spheres. However, it descended from its level. So now he's saying two things. In the parentheses, one thing. So in addition to the fact, besides the fact that this descent through the essential revelation that now it's a separate, it's a distinct entity. It's a tangible entity. And especially when it's transmitted and revealed on its own. That it becomes an entity. And it's no longer formless, literally formless the way it was before the tzimtzum in the hidden spheres. The head that Apshitis has a gamkein is. Its lack of formlessness is also a concealment of the energy.
It mentions Nassim tears the devil twice.
Yeah.
Once.
Yeah, because there's two things. One is there's several things going on. One is there's a descent. The mere fact that it gets revealed means it's no longer where it was, because before it was all combined with the others. The frat is adding that it gets revealed as a separate thing. He doesn't say separate before.
I know. So it seems like they're all.
No, so he's talking. Yeah, no, not that it is. He's just saying he's breaking down what's happening here. One is that the letter or Chochma is now just being revealed. Another is that it's revealed as a distinct, separate entity, and therefore it's not pshittis. Hypothetically, you could say something is revealed, but it's still in its formless shape. Like you wouldn't, let's say, see the boruch, the Beis. You would just see it as part of something bigger. So even though it's starting to emerge, it's not yet a distinct letter separate. So the second thing that he adds here is that it's also pshittis. It's not pshittis no longer. It's no longer formless. So besides being revealed, it's also not formless. Yeah, he did speak before about that if it was revealed exactly the way it was, it would all like the Keches Nalamim or something like that.
Like the ray within the sun.
Huh?
Like before he mentioned like the ray within the sun.
Yeah. The head that it's like two things here. One is that there's the actual revelation of a letter. Yeah. And then there's the way it's a distinct entity. And it's no longer that formless because also lack of formlessness, he says, is also due to the concealment of the energy. Remember, he said before in the parentheses as well that there's two things going on here. This is consistent to previous parentheses. He said that the reason that the higher world, even the highest worlds, cannot contain the energy of the 10 hidden spheres is one, because the actual thing that they are pshittis, that they are formless. And second, because they contain within them a very high revelation. Think of boruch, all the ideas. So besides the fact that the letter is formless because it's combined with all the others, it also contains in it energy that's far beyond. So here too, when it descends and it's revealed the letter, two things happen. Number one, that it now is not, that it does not have that energy. It's now a separate letter, separate idea. I'm sorry, that it's that's become a tangible entity. And the second, that it's revealed as a separate thing and does not have the formlessness. So both elements are necessary, because one is that it's mixed with the others, and the other is that it carries another higher energy. It appears that's what he's trying to say here too. So the first thing that is that it no longer has that energy. Then it's a distinct thing, so it's not formless, and that too, that lack of formless too, is a form of hidden. Okay, yeah. Let me go back to this for a second. The hidden spheres. There are two things that give them power, so to speak, intensity. One is that they're all combined together. So there's a lot of energy in that. And then secondly, their combination means they're also carrying other energy, all the other energy from before the tzimtzum. So boruch, for example, has the fact that it's with other reish vav chav, makes it an entity that's very intense, that cannot be contained without a tzimtzum. But then it also contains ideas that he's been discussing, the meaning of boruch and all that. That's even beyond the four letters. Because boruch could just mean the limited idea of a bracha. But once you start to all the ideas of boruch, everything, then that makes it even more impossible to be contained without a tzimtzum. So what I believe he's saying is the same thing as here. There's one that you need to have is that it becomes a metzias davar, so it doesn't have the whole concept. But it's still pshittis. It still can be pshittis. It still can be mixed with the other letters. So it doesn't have all the meanings of boruch, but it's still more than just a base. Then comes the second thing, but flat, it becomes separate from the reish vav chav. So even in the word boruch, the base becomes separate even from the word. So it's even a deeper concealment now. And then he's saying, Hidden Sefirot is also a form of concealment. You see, in other words, both are concealing the energy. One conceals all the concepts. The other one conceals even the most basic concept of boruch. Yeah. This is all the parentheses. So in addition, besides all this, and now he goes outside the parentheses, well, this looks like what I just said. Okay. Shenesalim, that is concealed the energy that was radiating in them when they were all together. So how is this different than what I just said in the parentheses? Okay, I think I should what I said is correct, but it's connected. The parentheses I think is emphasizing primarily number one, not number two. It's not emphasizing the diminishing of the concept of everything that was radiating. I think what he wants to say is a little deeper even. When you have the word boruch, you lose sight of the letters. Because once you start focusing on the message, someone who has a comprehension of the word baruch, not a child, who doesn't know that it's made up, who only knows letters. Once you hear the word baruch and bracha, you start learning everything in Chassidus and the Nigla, you lose sight of the letters. And all you know is the concept. So on that level, if that's revealed, the worlds could not contain that. It needs a diminishing of that. So the first thing you need is just to recognize the word baruch, almost like making it clear that we're talking letters here and not just a concept. But they still they still have the idea in them. You can't say that the worlds can yet contain them. But what you've done is the first descent is that they become, that's what he says, the first descent is they become etzem izgalus. You're basically defining letters here, baruch. Whereas you were just thinking about the abstract idea that's contained in these letters, the word and so on. Instead of a word, you're now seeing a word made up of letters. And then he adds in the parentheses, and specifically when you start seeing the letters distinct, and they're no longer pshitus, because you could still say baruch, but it's still one word. Now we're separating. Let's make believe you take the beis reish vav chaf and you separate them. So that's the second step, where now they're becoming they're not pshitus anymore, as they were before. Before they were all connected. Obviously, with baruch it's not pshitus because it's four letters, but think of it in the example in the hidden spheres, they're all combined. So they're formless in that sense. Like you said before in the parentheses, they were formless on their own, and also the energy that within them, which is the message that they carry. So both the letters were formless because they were part of a bigger word, and also that word contains a lot of more energy than even the word itself is, than the word on its own. So he's saying, Hidden Sefirot, this is also a concealment. So all these are gradations. First you have sense a word, then that word is made up of separate letters, and now they're no longer pshitus, they're no longer formless. And this is already also a concealment because you're already, so to speak, diminishing from where its original state when it was completely abstract. And then he's adding what I said before. I'm bringing it further. Then in addition to what happens by the appearance of their identity and by the distinction, is that the energy that was in them before, which was the whole message, that the energy that was radiating in this world and in these ideas, when they were all united, is all concealed. Like the example of the letter Beis above, when it was in the word baruch, it had in it the concept, the whole idea of blessing that we discussed earlier. When it was separated, when it's separated, it does no longer have from this concept, only a minimal amount, ma'at, a little, an impression alone, canal, I discussed earlier. The same as when there was the transmission of the sphere of Chochma alone. It only has within it only a bit, ma'at, a little of diminished form, or a little of the previous energy. Kitzur. And the summary is like this. Valderech Moshel, and for example, Tevis Baruch Shemalubish Bo Haskola. The word Baruch, that within it is manifest an idea. When you separate the letter Beis by itself, it does not have in it only a bit from the seichel, from the idea that was manifest within it. And it's still, yet it's the same letter that was there, exactly the same letter that was there before. The same thing with Chochma. Through separating as a distinct entity on its own, besides leaving its formless state, it also is a diminished form of life and energy. This is the key here, because if you remember the end of last chapter, he said two things. That when spheres of Chochma, when Chochma becomes a distinct entity after the tzimtzum, look at the last line, 3 lines in the last chapter. The nimtza, haikar is the spheres of Chochma, the recognition of the sphere of Chochma, shaydai is chalkus, through separating, ein zadak be'etzem uhusa. It's not only in its fundamental essence that now it's recognizable Chochma, kim gam b'chinas mita'ev. It's also diminished energy. In other words, very much part of what he's building here is that it's not just a distinct entity, but it's also a diminished form of energy going in there. Yeah, that's a critical point. He said that before. And if you look at the Kitzur also, that's why this whole parenthesis keeps going here. It's going to be very relevant because later he wants to say that the tzimtzum in the energy, in the hagvul, which means the essence 10 hidden spheres, is only a miyut. But it is a miyut. There is a diminishing of energy. And it's not enough. In other words, the Chochma of the revealed Chochma is not just that it's a distinct Chochma. It's also diminished. So it does not have the same energy level. Like the Beis of Baruch does not have all that content, only in a concealed form or a diminished form. Yeah, it's going to be critical because probably the distinction between the containers and the energy. The containers, the main thing, they have no energy altogether. So they are only going to be distinct entities. And here he's saying the Chochma is a distinct entity and also diminished energy. Whereas Kalim probably have no diminished energy at all. Or the other extreme, the Kalim don't have any tzimtzum because they reflect the etzem. The tzimtzum doesn't affect them.
Okay.
So the air has both sides of it. It's energy that remains energy transcendence, but it's diminished. We said that a lot earlier. Yeah. That the advantage of the containers is that they're not affected by the tzimtzum. But because they retain their quality, but they're not revealed. With air, it's revealed, but it's diminished. So the tzimtzum impacts the air. That's going to be the ultimate distinction. In kalim, in order for the kalim to emerge, you need complete concealment. For the air, you only need diminished. But ironically, paradoxically, the air diminishing, so it's not as great tzimtzum. But on the other hand, the containers can retain their fundamental essential quality, except not in a revealed form, and the tzimtzum doesn't impact them. So the tzimtzum conceals everything to allow the containers to emerge. So the containers are actually unscathed by the tzimtzum, where the air is affected by the tzimtzum, but it still remains air that's revealed. Mm-hmm. So these two elements is what he's focusing on. That's why he's talking about that the air is diminished. It's a way of reconciling what he said earlier, because you could technically say that, you can't really say it, because if there's no way that the sphere could be distinct if it was not diminished. But technically, there's 2 steps here. One is a distinct entity. In other words, if you conceal the bligvul, the entity emerges, and the second is that the entity has now diminished energy within it. That's a critical component as well.
It becomes, like say the Jacobson, once it becomes distinguished, it automatically covers itself up.
There's no automatic. It's automatic. It's two separate elements to it.
Yeah,
The distinction of it,
they
they could be habataya, but he didn't say that. He's saying basically both elements are taking place here.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the one leads to the other, and one is connected to the other. Okay, so we'll stop here. So we did chapter 23, pages 36 and 37.